There we go. Hey everyone, it's currently November 11th right now, and we're doing Day 9 daily number 14. We're going to be doing a little bit of Flash vs. Best action, and I really like this game, and because it's really illustrative. I hope that's a word. It's illustrative. You have to say it quicker and skip over syllables, and it makes you sound smarter. It's very illustrative of a lot of concepts revolving around harassment and this sort of thing. So since there's not going to be that much action going around at the start of this game, I'll have a good opportunity to talk a lot about why there's not too much attacking going on. But before we begin, I have to share a little bit about what's going on in the world right now. We have the WCG matches going on right now that my oh-so-lovely brother Nicholas Alexander Plott is shoutcasting. So since there's only me and him going on right now, just make sure you have us up on two monitors. And if not, just make sure we're side-by-side on your single monitor. Make sure we're both full screen so that way you can maximize your plot experience. What else is going on? Oh, the Independent Games Festival submission date is November 15th, so I'm doing a lot of not sleeping lately. I've pulled 3 30-hour days in a row and only missed one Day 9 daily, so I'm pretty pleased about that. Alright, sweet. Here's my thug snap that I've been practicing. I can get it like 20% of the time, and it hurts. It feels horrible, but I have to do it because I'm so pumped up about this game. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Get a little bit of screaming from the audience. Let me turn up the volume. Yeah. Alright, sweet. Since we're hitting about over 200 viewers, I'm going to go ahead and mute the chat. I'm going to periodically unmute the chat just to make sure that everything's going okay-ishly with the stream. And again, if there's any lag or anything's crashing, definitely message me on Skype. Because with this software, even though it's like really good, occasionally it kind of overloads itself and I end up losing frames and it gets really laggy. And of course we can never have that because my viewers are oh so important to me. Once again, yeehaw, 1 million viewer minutes, over 1 million as you can see at the bottom, which means I am a true geek among geeks. So hip hip huzzam. So right now we have Fighting Spirit. I like this map quite a bit. Whoopsie daisies. I'm going to be opening it up on the other screen while we set everything up here. It gives a lot of opportunities that, I mean, it seems God's Garden-ish, you'd say. I mean, the map itself each main has a natural expansion. So, for example, here's Flash's natural right here. And then you have, like, a second natural expansion, as we're going to be able to see right here. So let's pause the stream a little bit. So this is going to barely fit in the screen, I think. So, my goodness, that is a sizable picture. Let me scale it down a touch. There we go. So you'll notice that each position has its own little natural, and then it has the second natural here, which you'll note is really easy to defend. You're naturally going to have some units piled up here to guard this fat bridge, and then you have the thin ramp here that you have to worry about. Plus, you have a wider ramp on your side, so if you move up from this angle, it becomes very easy to defend your own, to defend your second natural. So basically, everyone's going to get their own little set of expansions here. What's most interesting to me is this center expansion. This has the most influence on Protoss vs. Zerg, and to a lesser extent Terran vs. Zerg, because Protosses are going to really like taking that center expansion, especially if they have a big map control. But unfortunately, we don't have any Zerg in this matchup today. So we'll just focus on the fact that Best is up here, and then we have Flash down here at the bottom right. So already Flash is not too happy about the fact that he has to push cross-map to his opponent. But either way, he'll be pushing either here or here to kill off whatever main Best ends up expanding to. A lot of times that ends up being a big decision you make in Terran vs. Protoss is where do I attack? Generally, if you're feeling lost, just attack the closest place. The closest place can never be that bad. In some circumstances, for instance on Colosseum, sometimes you'd attack the main just to contain it and then sort of spread out and hit the other ones. But as long as you attack the closest one, because it's easiest to reinforce and hardest to be counterattacked, as long as you have some sort of good reason like that, it doesn't hurt. Also, what's going to be kind of significant here is that Protoss should be aware that expanding to opposite sides of the map is going to be a big benefit, because Terran kind of has to commit to either going one way or the other. So I really do like expanding to the other main. So for instance, if Best has these and then has taken these two, taking that other main there instead of taking something closer by is something I personally prefer. So that was quite a lengthy map analysis, and thankfully we get to go right back to the game. So, right now, it's important we talk about the fundamental theorem of harassment. And I'm going to say this, and all of you are going to be like, well, yeah, that's obvious, but you need to make sure that in any replay of your own you watch, or in any game of someone else's that you watch, you make sure that no one's violating this fundamental theorem. And this is the following. Sorry, just resizing this window a touch. If the harassment does more damage than it costs, it was very effective. If it does less damage than it costs, it's not so effective. And I know that sounds silly, but for instance, let's think about another game that is related to this one, but in a different matchup. In the epic Bisu vs. Jaedong Protoss vs. Zerg on Blue Storm, Bisu did this insane harassment where he was dropping a whole bunch of Dark Templar at expansions, he was killing off hatcheries, he was storm dropping, he was even Reaver dropping in there with speed shuttles, and he had like 8 Corsairs, and it was unbelievably strong. But in the end of the game, Jaedong just kind of ended up winning, and it blew everybody's mind. But that's because Bisu's harassment was so intense that it was incredibly expensive. So the end result of it was that Jaedong still wasn't damaged enough to make that harassment worthwhile. So, for instance, in Flash's play, as we're going to see, Flash plays very Turtle-ish. And this is a style of play Flash is known for, where he does a lot of long-term powering. The reason for this, or the reason we don't see any harassment put into his play oftentimes, is because he's so good at managing his economy that it's actually not worthwhile for him to harass in some points. So in these games where you see no harassment going on, make sure you can also clearly see what else they're spending their money on. So for instance, instead of spending money on a dropship with a bunch of vultures early, we see Flash spending money on an armory for an upgrade early. Those are the sort of considerations we make. People tend to go along the lines of, oh, harassment is always good. I will always try to harass. And what ends up happening is they awkwardly throw in these harassments into their games. And you end up with hilarious things happening. You know, you'll end up with a player who takes his Templar to Storm Drop, and it doesn't go so well. And then this Protoss player suddenly realizes he doesn't even have any Templar at his front. He actually took all his Templar, or all the amount that he needed. And then he ends up losing to a big push at his front. So fortunately, we're starting to see a few branches in this gameplay right now, so that way we can actually start focusing on exactly what's happening. We see Flash is doing the very, very standard early expand. You know, we saw these guys coming out of gas for a little bit, just to get a few extra minerals to start this command center down here a touch earlier. And we also see this great move by Best. I like this a lot. He starts walling off this area right here. As we can see on the map, he's putting a wall here so we can wall off the thin choke to this his second natural expansion. And I like that because he wants to build a wall here anyways, because he wants to expand fairly soon. And also, it prevents any sort of weird counterattacking, because sometimes Protoss will move forward and the Terran will counterattack here. Boxer did that against Pusan on a very, very old game on Luna. Way back when Hwasong Oz was called the Plus Pro Team and was actually the worst pro team in the league. So, yeah, and this was actually before Pusan moved to Pirates of Space, which is now NBC Game Hero. Something to note about Best Play that I just stopped one frame too late. Here we go. This is the standardest thing in the world. Gateway, straight into a robotics facility for observers, straight into the range. This is what I would call a very, very safe build. It really has no aggressive capabilities early. So we need to think about what is it that we're making up for by having pretty much no aggressive capabilities. And the answer is that we get these observers so quickly that we get to see what our opponent is doing very quickly, and therefore make a very informed decision based upon that. So notice that this first observer beelined for Terran. It didn't even stay back worried about Vulture harass, like direct line. We even see a Zealot was made for Protoss early on, and no attacking was done with this Zealot. This Zealot just hung out at the front. Very, very safe play, clearly a macro-oriented play, just doesn't want to die early because Best has some long-term plans. So let's talk a little bit about this placement for Flash. I'm a little confused why that turret's so far down, so I'll ignore that, and maybe I'll be able to have a revelation later on. But what I really love about Flash is building placement. He has some of the best building placement I've ever seen. actually my memory's starting to kick back in. So we have a turret here, and there was the turret I was confused about right here. What we're going to see Flash do is he's going to end up right down about here on the map. This is where he's going to build the rest of his factories. So notice that this turret here that you can barely see, this turret here, and then this turret we're going to see in 2 seconds here. Come on, show us the turret. That guy, this guy that's firing right now. This turret and the two back there that we talked about, those are going to prevent the observer from seeing when the factories start getting built down at the very, very bottom edge of the map. And Flash's goal with this, obviously, is to screw up the gateway timing of Best. So that's definitely something to think about, is that Flash has really good placement with those turrets, so that way, Best has no idea when Flash's flood of factories occurs. So we see a little double observer action going in there to poke in, just to really get an idea. Because again, I spent some time earlier saying that Best does this build that revolves around no early pressure. And the way he makes up for that is by doing a lot of scouting with the observers and making some super informed, very, very specific response. But we saw that he couldn't get the observers in. So that's why he is sending in these two observers. It was correct to say that he is doing this to figure out exactly what Flash is doing so he can make a very extreme decision. Now he sees this armory. So now Best is really going to start doing something specifically to deal with that. We still only see 2 gateways in Best's main, and it looks like he's going to be expanding right there. Look at these numbers. Very, very standard, very typical sort of Protoss vs. Terran would be 2 gateways expanding, 2 more gateways expanding again. But instead we see 2 gateways expand, straight for Arbiters. And I'm almost certain we have another geyser coming down here far earlier than it normally would be. I just really, really like this response because this is a response based on the long term. It's not based upon any harass or any intense pressure early on. It's based completely on good management of economy and good ordering of these buildings. So that's the key that I'm going to be focusing on a lot with Best and Flash this game, is the ordering of these buildings. So notice we have an armory coming down, or excuse me, an academy and scans coming down before the second factory ends up being finished. And look at this great building placement. Look at that solid wall. Doesn't need to have too much defense here, can leave the rest in his main for something else. And look at these red buildings at the top of the mini-map. Great job. Definitely going to be spotting any sort of incoming Reaver. I mean, which clearly isn't coming in. And look at this. This is also equally kick-ass by Flash. So, again, to compare the players, Best suicided an observer. He packed 2 together to hug along this bottom wall to really figure out what was going on down here in Flash's base, so he could make this extreme decision. So he could get this expansion after 2 gateways, so he could get these Arbiters with still 2 gateways. And then we see Flash getting some very, very early scan. And look, he just scanned it right here. Let's actually just go back in case any of you missed that. So again, he's going to be doing the very stereotyped decisions. Very, very good. Very awesome placement. Lots of floating going on with the buildings. So then we're going to see the observer click right back up here. So checking out, continuing to wall off, definitely do that. And look right here. The scan, super good. Very, very, very awesome. Flash probably got those academies so early, and those scans so early, so he could do a few key scan positions. And that way he can make sure he doesn't die to carriers or something like that. Because in their last encounter, Best ended up just rushing for carriers on Coliseum and straight up killed him. Doing something different this game. So anytime you're doing this sort of very power-intense build, you want to make sure you don't put no pressure on your opponent unless you have some sort of out-of-control timing. You want to make sure that you're at least doing something. That's why these vultures are poking around the map. Going to plant just a few mines, not too many. Notice how Flash looks for opportunities, but he doesn't commit. He doesn't try to take advantage of something that isn't there. And I don't want to use the word I don't want to use the word forced. I don't want to say he doesn't force the opportunity, because Flash is very good at forcing things to happen, which is a discussion that I did in Flash vs. Hogel that unfortunately got lost. So I'll have to go back and do that again at some point. But But really, if you want to do harassment, make sure that there is a hole there. And if there isn't, don't try to pretend there is. You can either force a hole by, distracting him, or otherwise you should just do exactly what Flash is doing and pull back a whole bunch. Look at this good placement. Not only does this cover the probes from drops, but it also covers any vultures that want to shoot right there. So still note all this positioning by Best. Best has not left this box with his units. He's stayed in his quadrant of the map. And we also see the usual timing coming for Flash. He's getting another armory right now. He's just starting to add factories at this bottom. But really, he got a handful of vultures. See, there's the third factory coming down. He got a handful of vultures to try to do some harassment, but mainly to plant mines here and here, because those are going to help his push a lot later. Because, even if we just take a minute to look at the map briefly, if you can get a few mines here and a few mines here, it's really going to cut Protoss off. I mean, if Protoss starts to wander this way, he has a minefield he has to go through, which buys you just enough time to pull your push back. Or likewise, if you're pushing in that direction, it prevents him from flanking super effectively. So still, note these numbers. He added on 2 gateways, and then he added on the 5th and 6th gateway, and we also see up here, just off the screen, we zipped past it. I'll actually rewind it so we can see it. We see a forge that's already gone down, is already researching +1. That's a pretty good upgrade to get against Terran. Look at how long-term this plan is for Protoss. And by the way, notice how that there's just been no interaction between the players. Vultures are trying to do something, but I mean, I think this is the first unit that's actually died from either player. It's just that one vulture. Look at how long-term this play is from Best. He took this expansion early, he got these Arbiters early, he got that Forge researching +1 really early, and now only is he adding on gateways, but still even not that many. He's still hanging out at 6, and he's doing another expansion. That's because Best did a really good job with those early observers, poking around, checking out what's up. See, look at this observer. These 2 buildings are really key to this build. So that's a great signifier for what's to come. And also we see that Flash is building those gateways, or excuse me, those factories, hugging along the bottom of the map, further demonstrating why that turret placement at the start of the game was so important. So now we have up to 8 gateways, and still more expanding coming from Best. Something else that I'm certain Best is doing, partly because I've seen this game, but also because it's along the theme of this long-term game plan, is that Best is going to be getting Storm very early. He's going to be getting a shuttle with some Templar in very early. In the meantime, Flash is just continuing to sort of turtle and let his upgrades come out. Because really, once he gets the 2-1 push, that's going to be the key moment for him to move out. Now, I do need to spend a little time talking about this science vessel that's wandering across the map. This is one of the most high-level moves I have seen in a long time. Yes, see, here's the factory flood, and here's that awkwardly placed turret that surprisingly is actually what's preventing these factories from being seen. And there's also another turret just off the map right over here. But this is an absolutely beautiful move. But make sure that you don't just start sending your science vessels cross map because you saw Flash do it. Really what we're seeing here is Flash is This is what I see. Flash is saying this first Arbiter that came out oh so early is going to give my first push a lot of problems. I mean, Flash probably practiced a whole bunch and, even probably told his opponents, go for a really fast Arbiter. I want to see how my build does against that. And Flash almost certainly encountered some sort of difficulty with the first Arbiter. So he is sending this vessel over to specifically take out that Arbiter. Do not think that this means that whenever you're playing Flash's style and whenever you see your opponent going Arbiter, that you should somehow bring your science vessels cross-map to take it out. Rather, you should say to yourself, how can I solve this difficulty of the really fast Arbiter? And Flash's solution to that was to get this science vessel over here very early. Another potential solution might be, well, I'm going to creep very slowly with my push, spread my tanks out a lot, and lay a lot of mines. So that way stasises can't be that good. And I'm going to spend a huge amount of money on turrets. Might not be as sexy as this, but could be totally effective. It's just important that you see that cause-effect relationship. That, hey, Arbiters are giving my first push a problem. Great. I EMP'd it. Because, I mean, part of another factor that signifies that that's why Flash moved that up there is that this vessel is retreating. Why not leave this vessel there to continue EMPing Arbiters? Part of the reason has to be that Flash really wants to make sure that this vessel is alive in the first push. So some considerations to make. So let's briefly discuss this timing that we saw from both players. So we saw Flash stayed on 2 factories early, then only a little bit later got a 3rd, and then took this third expansion very quickly. And right around the time his +2/+1's coming out, he's moving out with his huge force. That is the timing. It happens around 150 food. Best, on the other hand, got super early Arbiters and a very early 3rd and a pretty early 4th as well, and stayed pretty low on gateway numbers. There's only 8 up here in the main, and only were these 4 added when this bottom expansion was taken. Keep in mind what those exact numbers are. 8 here and then 4 there. Plus these early Arbiters, and look, here are the early Templar. We never actually got to see them, but I mentioned them because they play a crucial role in this battle. Now, the most important thing, I'm even going to pop up on the screen like this. I'm even going to make the screen 3D to illustrate how important this point is. Note that in this battle, how close it is. That is the most crucial thing to note in this battle. Actually, this makes me feel weird. I'm going to come down here. You need to note how unbelievably close this battle is, with no harassment by either player and really strong builds that have upgrades from both players, that have almost totally completed tech trees at first encounter, nail-bitingly close. And that's what I love so much about this game in particular, is that it shows the power of just having a well-timed build. Look at this nice movement by Flash, or excuse me, by Best. So Flash moved a little bit forward here, and we saw Best's units were in this sort of arc, and then they started to close up into about a line like this, and this is where Flash's units were. Flash clearly had an arc advantage and was funneling units through here. So Best pulls up here and pulls back here. Very patient, very good. Pulling right back here, pulling back. See, look, does not want to get caught in that funnel, except for this Dragoon, because he's a Dragoon, and Dragoons really do have the worst AI in any game that has ever been invented in the past 30 years. That is just the absolute epitome of just terrible AI. So, watch these storms. This is going to be really good. First, this Arbiter gets this Science Vessel. EMP does get off. But notice the crucial role these EMPs play. A lot of units are clustered right there. So there's 2 storms, and then 3 killing this off, and 4. That's so much extra damage right there. Flash clearly wasn't expecting that, but look at this. Flash holds it off. Flash's push is still in business. That's how incredible Flash's style of play is. I feel that a little bit of a misstep happened here. So what we're seeing right here, and let's go reference the map, is that we saw some mines laid down here by Flash, and Flash is doing the smart thing. He wants to plant mines here to prevent these 8 gateways from reinforcing. But he's planting mines here and moving forward with 6 or 7 tanks completely unreinforced. Here are those tanks moving forward. And here are the mines being planted in between. But what happens is stuff gets cut off. Watch what happens to these tanks down here. Not quite enough patience. There's a few tanks that have actually died right there. But see, these mines are doing their purpose, but we've already lost all these tanks, and really you kind of needed to keep those things alive. If Flash had maybe retracted just a little bit there, maybe waited, sieged, and planted some mines in front of those tanks, then tried to cut off, and then tried to move to the right, we may have seen a completely different outcome. Still, it's important to see that after that huge fight, after this enormous fight that happened right here, where Flash got to do everything he wanted to do and had huge upgrades, and Best was left completely unaffected in the early game, Flash still ended up holding off that first big encounter. And see, right here is what Flash should have done in the first place. He shouldn't have moved those tanks that far forward. And this is good, you know, obviously trying to kill this off so you can take out some probes. But Flash is really smart, not going to bring all his... Ooh, that was really good. Not going to bring all his vultures back. He needs to lean back some to reinforce these tanks. We're also starting to see now what's so strong about Best's play. He gets all these Arbiters so quickly. I mean, some of these Arbiters didn't actually get to participate in that first fight because they got EMP'd, but now that energy's starting to build back up, and we have 3 Arbiters we have to deal with. There's a 4th Arbiter. At this point in the game, Terran traditionally is only up against 1, maybe 2 Arbiters. 2 is actually very, very standard to be up against, but now he's up against these 4 Arbiters and 5 bases of macro. Beautiful, beautiful setup. And I would attribute much of this success to those Templar. It seems like the Templar were most instrumental in that first push, and obviously a whole bunch of macro. But the Arbiters are starting to be more important as time progresses because it's just so good at giving you a very, very mobile army, and you can now stasis all those key points. So let's pause for a minute. The way that you normally want this to happen, let me actually just sneak this over here so that way I can come up on screen. The way you normally end up planning your gameplay out, especially when you're doing the flash style, is that you want to take these 3 bases like we see here, but you need to have some way of taking your 4th. So on a map like Andromeda, that would be pushing towards your opponent and then taking one of the side expansions or something like that. So for instance here, if we just look at the map, it would be something, whoopsie daisies, it would be something like pushing this way to take this expansion, or pushing up to this main and taking this expansion. The reason I say to choose this expansion that is right where all the action's happening here is because these expansions are so vulnerable. When you're playing this giant mass army style, you want the expansion to be where your army is. So this, in my eyes, is the safest place for Terran to be. That's why I think Flash is battling so hard for control right here. Even if Flash couldn't really push up into these mains, taking this expansion is a good first step. Always make sure you have a plan for what you want your 4th expansion to be when you're doing this Flash style play. And obviously, the big problem right now, the reason I stopped to illustrate this, is that Flash has been pushed back and has to play defensively. And that's going to be ugly because you have to do stuff like this. You have to take a completely naked expansion and just say, man, I sure hope he doesn't attack that, which is no fun. I mean, because he's going to attack it. I mean, if he's a good player at all, he's just going to walk over there and kill it, and he's going to have scouted it just like this. And no hesitation by Best. Absolutely no hesitation attacking this expansion. I know a lot of you like doing this trick, which is to let the expansion finish and then kill it off. Sometimes you can do that. Like if you're playing Zerg vs. Terran, and you're playing Terran, and the Zerg player is building a hatchery, and you see it, it's almost done, and you wait a little bit until it finishes to then go kill it. That's great. That's a really good technique. The problem is you always run the risk of letting that expansion finish. So when I see Best moving all his stuff like this, straight over the expansion, that to me says Best is certain that he is in a really good position, so he doesn't need to take any risks letting the expansion finish. He can just straight up kill it and box flash in even more. That's exactly what we see here. Look, sees it, immediately sprints up here, takes it out. We even have some units down here continuing to keep Terran into this box right here. And a lot of what I'm starting to see right now is, after those first 2 pushes were held off right there, Protoss' main goal is preventing Terran from getting a 4th, is just keeping Terran right here. That's always a good thing to think about, especially when you're getting into these long-term matches, is to give up the idea of killing your opponent and to focus on starving your opponent. Starvation is something that's really downplayed, especially in a lot of analysis videos. So I really like to emphasize that right now, this attack is doing an incredible job, but Best doesn't necessarily go for the jugular. He instead just pulls back and continues to keep Terran to 3 bases, while expanding all the way up there on the top. Now, at the start of the game, and I'm definitely, I planned this, don't worry. At the start of the game, I said that I do like expanding to these opposite corners of these opposite mains because it makes it really hard for Terran to push either way. However, if you're in a huge lead and Terran is boxed in, it's okay to take the easier to defend expansion for you. It's always important to weigh what's easiest to defend versus what's hardest to attack, which allows you to counterattack. And clearly with Best at this incredible economic advantage, can easily take this which is about as equally hard to push as would be the top left. Maybe a little bit easier, but still definitely the safer option. Look at this. Look how many Arbiters this is. One EMP nailed all those Arbiters. Doesn't matter. Best is still ready to put the hurt on. So many units. So many units. I still think it's... Okay, so let's count these numbers. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is what I counted. Let me just go back because I want to make sure those numbers get counted out. So we had 5 gateways here. We see a bunch of zealots streaming out. There's 1. Yeah, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I want to say it's 9. I couldn't quite tell with that really fast cut. And the reason I want to think about these numbers is to think about the progression of how Best did his opening. I'm going to stick with 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, I'm going to stick with 10. The reason I spent so much time focusing on those numbers is because, really, Best did not get that many more gateways after those first mid-game pushes. I mean, so he stayed on 2 gateways, expanded twice, then went up to 6 gateways, took the other main, then added up to 8 gateways in his main, and he had 4 gateways the other expansions. Now he's at 12. That's a lot of gateways. But then he's taken another expansion, he's taking a 6th expansion at the north, and he's only added on 3 more gateways since he had that 12 gateway amount. So he's up to a total of 15, which is a ton. But he could even probably support a touch more, but he's spreading his money out on Arbiters, Upgrades, Templar. Really, really smart thing to do. And I really like focusing on those numbers because it illustrates when the macro stages are occurring and when the econ stages are occurring. He was powering really hard, focusing on econ early, and then once he had 4 bases, that was when the explosion of gateways occurred. That allowed him to not only have enough units to hold off the push, but also get some Arbiters and some Templar there. So Flash right now is in a little bit of a desperation mode. Best is clearly at the advantage. And look at this. Here's a huge army still not moving in for the push. Just focusing on keeping expansions alive, clearing out, keeping a little bit boxed in. This is the first time that Best has moved all the way into Flash's base. And notice there's also kind of a predominance of Dragoons here. That has a lot to do with how open of a map this is. It's very easy to spread the Dragoons out and not run the risk of all of them exploding to a few tank shots. So Flash was in a little bit of a desperation mode. I'm going to pause it before the game ends. But Flash wanted to push up here and take out these expansions and expand here as he slowly walked up and just murdered Best. But unfortunately he couldn't. So he's going to set up here, which is kind of icky because notice that this is a small area for Terran to have, and he also has no retreat room. And here's a big, fat arc for Protoss to attack with. And that's what we see Best doing right now. And really the only thing Flash could hope to do was to wander down here and physically place units here and mines here to defend this expansion. The reason that sucks so much is that if you push up here and you cut off these expansions for Protoss, when you expand here, you don't need any units defending this because all those units are here. But now, Flash has some units here out in the middle and some units here. It really sucks to split your units up right like that. It's just like fast ticket to death. And then there's the good game right there. So I'm going to do what I do pretty much every time, which is to zoom in, focus on the minimap. We can focus a little bit on how bummed out Flash is, but let's go ahead and rewind back here and just look at the minimap. So zooming right in using the wonderful procasting software that only every so often ends up crashing and burning. But, I mean, watch the minimap here. Look at how nothing is crossing the top right box. Look at how everything just stays right in there. That is just incredible. The only thing that's moving over here are these observers to suicide in. And look at these decisions that we're able to make. We're able to make Arbiters here. We're able to expand here. And we still don't have any gateways being added on right there. Still sticking with 2. And look at this. Look, it literally is just hanging out in that box. The only time he leaves the box is right now when he's moving down southward to take the expansion. And then look, once he does that, he's not even crossing this line. Very, very defensive play, and all the fancy stuff is going on in the ordering of the buildings. The fancy stuff is going on... uh-oh, sorry. Is there lag going on? Is there lag? Well, there's not too much spam about it, so I'll just go ahead and resume. So, go away, go away. There we go. Yeah. All the fancy stuff was going on up here in the top right. He's not doing any movement over here to try to screw up his opponent. Instead, he's just getting a really early Forge, really early Arbiters, very early Shuttle with Templar. Very, very defensive, very econ-driven. Very, very cool style to see, because, I mean, there's been this huge shift towards high aggression early. I mean, see, even here, the armies are getting bigger. We have 8 gateways there, 4 gateways there. Huge macro. And look, this is the farthest the units have ever been to the left during this first push. And see, look at this. Even with, here's that first push going on, clamping down in on it. Best, still, he has some opportunities to even advance forward, but he doesn't. He just pulls back. Flash is trying to move forward and just keeps butting him out of his half. This is very similar to the game of Hogel against Mind. And see, look, wandering up here, and we're starting to see how boxed in Terran is. Really, really cool to see how little Best is moving straight into the main of Flash. Flash can do whatever he wants. And then, of course, there is the end, is good game. So, yeah, I'm more than happy to take some questions. If anyone has some questions, please go ahead and ask them in yellow. We're going to end up with a little bit of a shorter game today because WCG matches are on. Don't want to keep anyone from watching my handsome brother talk about StarCraft because that's really what we're all about in the Plot family. So, Clockwise asks, when Flash scouted the really fast Arbiter, meaning 2 to 3 gateways, why would he choose to expand once again instead of cutting SCVs to create a 4-factory +1 timing push? Great question. And one that requires hydration. I actually want to see. Let me hold the mic up to my throat and see if you can hear me drinking. Yeah, this is my microphone, by the way. It's huge. It's a really awesome microphone. It's called a Snowball. So, here's my answer to that. So, anytime you see your opponent taking an expansion, in any matchup in StarCraft, it doesn't matter what it is, anytime you see your opponent taking an expansion, you know that he is going to get an economic advantage later and is sacrificing security now. So you have 2 basic ways to always exploit expanding. One is to attack in the weakened state, or to expand yourself and to make sure that you're stronger later. Flash clearly was opting for the later one. So the reason I think he perhaps was not... the reason I think that perhaps he was going for his 3 base instead of just expanding and attacking, one is that his opponent's cross map. The second is that the upgrades are going to be so helpful with the EMP that I think Flash is a little bit more comfortable with that. And also, let's actually go back to the main screen. I think Flash likes the fact that this expansion is so close. Flash is probably thinking, go ahead and go Arbiters and take these bases because I'm going to push, cut you off here, and then I'm going to take this expansion with ease. If this expansion maybe weren't here, if this expansion were gone, I think Flash maybe would have done a style of play that was much more aggressive. There was a great game on... I can never remember the name of this map. There was an epic game between Shuttle and Flash on it. It's this blue map with inverted ramps where you start on low ground and move up to high ground. And hopefully someone will say it on the stream so I can re-mention it. But that map had a very difficult to take 4th expansion for Flash. You couldn't just wander over to it. Oh, Holy World. I always forget it has the friggin' pentagram in the middle. I don't know how I screw that up. Yeah, Holy World was the name of the map. It's a lot harder for Terrans to take a 4th gas expansion on that map. So, Flash, we saw, opt for a really huge Mass Vulture, super, super, super aggressive play. So, to answer Clockwise's question in short, why didn't he do for some sort of 1-factory timing push? I think in his eyes, he thought that his long-term plan was so good because he could also take expansions in the long term that there was no reason to sacrifice that, given the architecture of the map. So Ender asks, why did Flash choose not to harass with dropships? He could. It seems he could have harassed horizontally for a large payoff. I think a big issue whenever you're thinking about harassment is again to go back to what is the advantage. If you don't harass, you run no risk of losing any money to harassment. You just run the risk of having kind of shitty timing with how you build things. In this case, we saw how rock solid Best was. He had Dragoons just really tightly packed everywhere. And there was virtually no chance for dropships to do that much. Also, let's take another look at the map. If we look at the architecture of this map, not a lot of good places for dropships to go. For instance, if we have this expansion here, we've pretty much secured any entrance into our main, and there's not much maneuverability for vultures here and here. Pretty much the only place a dropship could squeak in is this top half right there. So that's why I think that dropship harass may not have been the best idea. But of course, as you point out, Ender, you should be thinking of ways to harass. So that's why we saw Flash move out with vultures early on. He's making attempts at harassment without running the big risk of having his dropship crushed. Because, I mean, here's one more thing to note. Even if we do get a dropship into the main, getting it out of the main again without dying is hard. Really, really tough thing to do. So I don't think dropship would be harassed best. Blah. Man, I said like 8 words at the same time. I don't think a dropship harass would be the best there, but I think ground vulture harass is good to make attempts at, and I think that perhaps, actually, let me go back and look really fast. I don't know if Best moved to the other mains and laid mines there with those early vultures. I want to take a look at that, because I do think that that's pretty important to do. We see the vultures moving around right down there. Oop, and we're missing half the minimap. There we go. But yeah, the vultures didn't get a chance to squeeze in there early. Maybe just sending one there to keep an eye on things. Maybe it would have been helpful. But again, it's the combination of Best being so rock solid and the lack of good harass paths, I think, is what makes it an opportune map to do that heavy powering style Flash did. T-Fact Rats asks a great question. Was Best susceptible to a 6th fact push, or did he know that wasn't likely from his observers? He definitely knew. I mean, he poked in there, he saw the armory, and then, though the observers weren't paying attention to it, if you look at the minimap, you can see this, the observers saw the 3rd command center going down. So, the way Best played, if he did not acquire that knowledge, he would have been just doomed. He would have died so fast. In fact, there was a really great game of Shuttle versus Flash in that same series I mentioned earlier, where Shuttle went for a super duper duper heavy powering style build, and Flash just attacked, and Shuttle had like nothing and killed him. The game was on Outsider. It was so brutal. So that really shows the importance of scouting, that if you can get the observers in there and you know exactly what your opponent's doing, you can make these wild decisions that seem so vulnerable. But only are they vulnerable if your opponent is doing something else. The fact is you're making a very specified decision there. So, good question, and that focuses again on how important it is to think about what you're seeing with those observers. Because most players just send the observers and they just go, they can see my opponent, I'm awesome. But they don't really make huge decisions off it. Crimson asks, what if Flash could stop Arbiter production? Getting a dropship and aiming specifically for the pylon, powering the Stargates, and then pushing. That's very risky. That's highly risky. The payoff for that is just not nearly good enough, because if you run in there, drop, and try to kill off the pylon, I mean, you're going to need tanks to do it, because vultures aren't going to do it fast enough. And the fact that Best was playing so defensively means that even if the dropship did manage to get there, I mean, it wasn't really going to do anything. You just would have gone there and killed it off. So, Hart asks, if in Terran vs. Protoss, your first push, like, wait, that is weirdly worded. I'm going to try to read it out loud and see if I can figure it out. In Terran vs. Protoss, if your first push, like Best did, if your first push died, why did he repeatedly push out and not save up for the crazy max Terran push? Okay, sorry. It took me a while to read, but... Okay, so the question, I think, is that the first push died by Flash. But why was Flash pushing so aggressively? If we even go back to look at the main screen, we see that... let's just look at the bottom. See, here's this first push, and it's dying. And then pulls back a little bit, and then we see more pushing going down right here again. I think a lot of this has to do with the fact, oops, I don't want you to see me yet, has to do with the fact that Flash really is trying to secure this expansion. It's less that he's trying to push in and kill, and more that he's trying to secure this to make that safe. I think that's the key consideration to think about. So yeah, that's honestly why I think he didn't save it for the max push. I think after that it was a clear failure that he wouldn't be able to do it. Then I think it's okay to start saving up, but even then that's a little bit of a desperation move. Getting that 4th expansion is pretty important. How was Best able to crush Flash's push so easily? Like, how come his storms were so effective, and when I storm, I can't, and my Templar just get killed by tanks? Storming is really, really hard to do, and a lot of it has to deal with the unload timing. A lot of times what happens in the Terran push is you see the tank siege, and then they fire. Then you should start unloading and storming. Sometimes you just unload and you storm away, but really a lot of the tanks tend to be synchronized in when they fire, so looking for a little bit of a hole there. Also, and here's something very significant, let's watch right how those first storms happen. So here's all the units. A lot of it is because these vultures can pick off the stormers so easily. Alright, come on, let's attack. If you can kill off the vultures early, I mean, generally you want the vultures to be kind of in the thick of things and then to pull back behind the tanks, but watch how many vultures are going to burn up here. This is not the best spot for these tanks. So right here, look at how he's unloading. Let's actually look at the unload timing in relation to the tank. So here's the tank fire. There's another load of tank fire, and then see, now the stormers are coming out. See how they all went boom, and then we see the first Templars coming out. That's actually so incredibly sickly time. We should just see that one more time. Look at this. Check this out. Boom, all the tanks fire. There's the storms. And look, so these Templar, the reason they're able to do so much damage is the fact that these vultures aren't close to the push, aren't close to the Templar, and the fact that these tanks have all just fired. So here comes all the storm. Totally awesome. And also, caught Flash at a little bit of an awkward angle. That's always helpful. Perhaps the most important thing to note about that question is the fact that Flash didn't actually die to the first push. He managed to hold off that perfectly timed economy by Best. It was only later did Flash really start to fall apart. So, Arctic asked a question, and I think I am going to wrap up on this question so everyone can go shoot over the WCG matches. The reason I believe Flash got boxed in is because if we look back at this game, so we still have a fairly significant amount of tanks. I think Flash should have come underneath here and sieged up down here in this area. But at the very least, he shouldn't have unsieged so eagerly with these units. So right now, Flash is in a pretty good position. He scans, and then these tanks are just going to die. There's actually 5 tanks that we count right here. And by the way, any of you looking for the World Cyber Game stream, just go to teamliquid.net, and they'll have like 80 of them there. So yeah, I mean, at this point, this is where I'm thinking, man, Flash really kind of shouldn't have moved there, because now he's stuck here. Now I would have started to build up a little bit. And also, another contributing factor to getting walled in. So, I mean, there's some more pushing going on here where Flash ended up dying. But also, there's this expansion that Flash tried to toss down up here. And Flash didn't cancel it. Flash tried to actually go up there and defend it. But, as was asked earlier, why didn't we save up for a maxed army? Isn't Terran super strong with a maxed army? Yeah, Terran is super strong on a maxed army. So I don't like the fact that Flash is so eagerly moving up here, because I just don't think his army is strong enough. He just doesn't have enough stuff. If he just camped out here a little bit, built up a little bit more, I think his push to the right, like the third one that happened, would have been a little bit stronger. So yes, that will in fact wrap up today's match. Tune in tomorrow for another Terran vs. Protoss. It's like Terran vs. Protoss week. We'll be doing free versus up magic. An insane game on Outsider, which is almost the exact opposite of what we saw today, which is, in this game, we saw both players playing very, very carefully back, doing a whole lot of expanding, a lot of cool unit timing. But in the other game, it's all about harassment and responding and dealing with pressure. And that's a great example of the fundamental theorem of harassment, is that if the harassment looks really good, it might not necessarily be really good, and it might end up costing so much you lose. So, peace out, everybody. Thug, snap. Ah, that hurts. Take it easy.